Well, toss that rusty old grill into the lake and set the Barca Lounger on fire. It's episode number 15 of the Dadward Spiral. I'm coming in hot. All the coffee I drank this morning just hit me. Hello, Eddie. Welcome back to the show.
Up,
Eddie was missing last week when I got to catch up with my old friend Drew Daywalt, horror filmmaker turned best-selling children's author of a book called The Day the Crayons Quit. He wrote The Day the Crayons Came Home. Apparently, Disney hired him to write a children's book about BB-8. He has a new book coming out in the fall called Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Kid, about a star that wishes on a kid. Like, that man just pivoted into Roald Dahl territory and is hugely successful. We had a great conversation, and I'm sorry you missed it, but I'm glad you're back. Uh-oh.
What happened?
Okay. We have a third person here saying, uh-oh. We'll get to him in a second.
I lost the video.
Oh, well, I have you on video, so it's fine.
Yeah, we can see you fine.
Yeah. Before we get to this person who was just saying, uh-oh, obviously not the most technically savvy person I know. Eddie.
Yes.
How's it going?
It's going good. It's the usual. It's we're just cranking through, trying to get through the end of the school year. We had spring break for the boys, and they had a fun. We tried to do a lot of fun stuff in the during spring break where they could do things, and we tried to take them out. But my wife and I both work during the day, and so it's like trying to get the right balance of of things to do for them that was like healthy for them, and just things like that.
Yeah, I ventured out to the park for the first time in a while with my daughter, and apparently it was the time of day where everyone was at the park. I've never seen it that crowded before. We rolled up and got out, and Lily said, "Oh, this is scary," because she just saw the large amount of kids there. And then it started raining, and everyone left, and she had fun on the swings.
Fair
before
enough.
we continue, I want to once again send a shout out to Dragon Wagon Radio, as we do in every episode. And I want to tell you all, if you enjoy what you're hearing, I really hope you enjoy what you're hearing. I mean, I know my voice can be a little bit annoying, but we are happy that you're joining us on this journey. Please go to iTunes to give us a review, like, subscribe. I say this every week. Send us candy if you want to. Mother's Day is going to be happening in a few days once this episode goes up. Hug your mom, say, or call her. I don't know. Tell her you love her. Something along those lines. Trying to be inspirational here. Yeah, not a lot new to report from this past week. So I guess we'll just get into introducing our guest. So this is the first time we have branched away from just having like TV people on or someone who works in the creative field. This gentleman I've known for 30 years. He was one of my first close friends in high school. He was able to grow a beard before pretty much any other boy in school. So I don't even remember if he was tapped to buy alcohol for friends, but he could have. He probably got into bars. I don't know. He's a paramedic. He was a firefighter. I guess he's also a firefighter. At one point, he was a drummer in a band. He's a father of 3. And he's here today to talk to us about his experience in raising 2 kids with type 1 diabetes. And I don't know, anything else he wants to talk about. Welcome to the show, Mr. Brian Levine. Hi, Brian.
Oh, thank you. Hello, Aaron. Hello, Eddie. Thank you guys for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you.
I will say that I was tapped to buy cigarettes in high school for one particular individual. I will leave that person nameless, his or her privacy. But, and yes, I was getting into bars at 19 years of age, freshman year of college, but I got that out of my system.
Yeah. Brian was when Brian made the pivot from being like a drummer, I thought he was going to be a rock star. He played the Whiskey, the Troubadour, bunch of different locations when we were in high school. I thought this was like, my buddy was going to be the next, I don't know, insert drummer name here. I'm not really
Neil Peart
at that. Sure. But
just nowhere is good.
Then he made a pivot that I wasn't expecting and became a firefighter, and sort of broke down certain stereotypes I have about Jewish men, me being one of them. That this guy got into CrossFit, became a firefighter, and then got married and had kids. And you met your wife on J-Date, which was cool. There were billboards of you and her kissing in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And then you had kids. And I want to specifically talk about that experience of working in, you said not necessarily the medical field or healthcare field, but working in this realm that you're in where you protect and take care of people, and then discovered that one of your kids and then two of your kids had type 1 diabetes. So the first thing I guess I want to go into is, how did you learn that? What were those early days like? What were the behavioral changes or symptoms that led you guys down this road?
I've talked about it with Amy a few times now that we've been doing this for...
Amy's the name of his wife, everyone.
Sorry, yes, Amy's my wife, for about 7 years now. And we both were like, how did we miss this like earlier than when we finally caught it? I would say that we didn't realize what was going on with him until about the week of his diagnosis, when like the classic symptoms like really started showing themselves, which would be, he was 5 years old at the time he was diagnosed, a few months away from his 6th birthday. So bedwetting, excessive thirst, excessive hunger, just moody, weight loss, just all of those things. And when we look at pictures of him before his official diagnosis, Amy's like, oh my God, like, look how sick he looked. And like, why didn't we pick up on this? And, the funny thing is, like in my job, as a firefighter and also a paramedic, I respond to people with diabetic emergencies pretty frequently, blood sugar being a pretty common emergency. So we'd go in there, we'd be like, oh, great, you have a low blood sugar. We'd start an IV and pump their veins full of sugar, wake them up, say, hey, eat something. Do you want to go to the hospital? Most of the times they did not. And then we just left and walked away, and we're like, yay, we saved you. And that was really basically what I knew about diabetes, is that, okay, we had a low blood sugar. Obviously that's not good. We need to fix it. I know how to do that. But I did not know the ins and outs of the condition, like how you manage it, why certain things happen the way they happen or when they happen. And I've learned that over the course of all these years that you could do everything to the doctor's letter, and sometimes just diabetes doesn't play nice. It can just smile and laugh at you like, somebody mocking you. And other days you have good days, but it's not a take two of these and call me in the morning sort of thing.
Right. Okay. So you got diagnosed. You got the diagnosis for, was it Finn?
McKay was the first one.
McKay.
Finn. Yeah.
And so then what do you do in that scenario? You start learning about how to maintain it.
Yeah. So basically, the day he was officially diagnosed, I was working an overtime day, and I knew Amy was going to be taking him to the doctor because we knew something.
Back up for a second. Can you explain to people what an overtime day means for a firefighter?
Yeah. So, in my fire department, we refer to it as SOD, which stands for scheduled overtime duty. So it was voluntary. Like I elected to work that day. And I tend to work 3 to 4 overtime days a month because I like making extra money. So I was doing that. And
well, what's the time commitment of an overtime day?
24 hours.
Okay.
Yeah. So I work 24-hour shifts, whether it's my normal shift or an overtime shift, unless it's specifically, we do have a certain amount of spots that could be 12-hour days. But I prefer to do 24s just because it's more money and I'm just used to, 24-hour days. But so like I said, I knew Amy was going to be taking McKay to the doctor, and they did a urine test, and they did they dipped a little stick in there to see what was going on. And Amy said the doctor said very calmly, so yeah, you're going to be going to the emergency room now, because he was spilling so much sugar into the urine. Like his blood sugar numbers were like off the charts, like I think beyond the capacity of what their meter and machines could even read. So it was like over 1,000, which is super, 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 super high. Like textbook normal is like 80 to 120 milligrams per deciliter, and his was 1,000. So that's like,
and he was 5.
He was 5. So Amy was frantically trying to call me, and I was on a run or a response. So I was unavailable, and she was calling like my cell phone a bunch of times, which was, I'm sure, left in the ambulance. And then she called the fire station.
To also elaborate here, your wife is an ER nurse, correct?
No, she is a nurse. She was
a nurse.
She was an oncology nurse for years at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. And she's now in school to become a nurse practitioner.
Oh,
and
got it. Okay, I'm just interrupting to say this just to establish that you both work in fields where you deal with stuff along these lines on a regular basis, but usually it's not personally connected to you.
Right. So anyway, long story short, I got tracked down at the hospital where we had taken our patient to, and the nurse came up to me and said, "Hey, you need to call your wife like right now." And I knew from that this was not going to be good. So I called her, and she told me what was going on. And I said, "All right, as soon as we're done dropping off this patient, I'm gonna head over to the hospital." And that's when we, got the official word that McKay was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So just to say that obviously that was not expected. That was kind of like a big blow to us and him and his brother. It was really, and our daughter was like maybe 1 at the time, so she had no idea what was going on. But it definitely threw a wrench into the gears. So
right.
He was hospitalized for 2 days, and they took very good care of him. But I remember, we had a diabetes educator come in, and then we got hooked up with his first endocrinologist, which we no longer see. We're with a new doctor, which we like 100% better. And I just remember how overwhelming it was with the diabetes education, because now they're talking in terms that I had never heard before. They're giving us all these like math equations, because you have to figure out, the amount of, and for those of you that don't know, I should have said this earlier. If you are diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, the more common name, probably more old school name for it, was insulin dependent diabetes. So both of my boys need insulin to survive. Without it, they won't. Their pancreas does not work at all. And thankfully, the advent of artificial insulin was discovered, because before it was available, it was a death sentence. Mm-hmm. So anyway, needless to say, the diabetes educator was like, "Okay, so now that we're dealing with this, we have to basically, you guys have to be a pancreas for him, since his no longer works. And you have to figure out the insulin to carb ratio, because it's the carbohydrates that people eat that cause the blood sugar to spike, and then the insulin is what helps regulate that. So for a person with a normally functioning pancreas, whenever we eat bread or candy or fruit or anything that has sugar, our pancreas secretes the appropriate amount of insulin that we need to break that down, convert it to energy, and then the rest, gets converted into waste. With him, because that wasn't happening, all of that sugar was just in the blood, and it couldn't be converted into energy, which is why there was the weight loss, which is why there was the excessive thirst, because the body's trying to compensate. So you want to drink more to try to dilute it, which is why there was the excessive urination, because the body's trying to get rid of all that sugar because it doesn't belong where it is. It was a really, really, it was devastating. I mean, it was like your 5-year-old kid, now has this lifelong disease that, he doesn't know what's going on. Of course, at 5 years old, he's not going to know how to manage it. And, it was a whole new learning thing that we had to learn and learn it quickly. Of course, obviously, you can't learn it all in a day. And I mean, I still don't think we're experts by any stretch of the imagination, but we certainly can rely on our experience and then knowing basically what his tendencies are. But now that he's 12 years old now, so now puberty's a factor, and this is insulin demands, or anyone's insulin demands as you're getting bigger and older are going to increase. And then of course with him, with puberty now being part of the equation, and the hormones kicking in, that's just going to put us on like that big roller coaster of ups and downs. And, some days are great, some days are bad. And so it's kind of called, I think a lot of people use the term sugar surfing in the diabetes world.
So you mentioned something interesting because my grandmother had T1D and was on insulin a lot. So I have like a familiarity with it. But when you talk about your your son not knowing what how to explain it to him, I do want to unpack that. I had skin cancer when I was 5, and so like there was a conversation that like my parent, I'd have surgery, I'd have targeted radiation, I'd have some stuff, and I didn't, they explained it to me, but it didn't really sink in. But
Right.
that was mainly because it was like a kind of after a 6 months period, we were essentially done with it. This is lifelong.
Right.
What can you walk us through like the conversations and how your kids process that, and like how much as part of the reality now is it for them? How has it like taken the infiltrated part of their identity to have this?
Well, we've tried to explain to them. They're like, hey, you got a bad deal, with this, but you're just like any other kid, except that, this is just something that you need to deal with, but you're no different. You're no better. You're no worse. You can still do all of the things that they do. You can play sports, you can run, you can climb, you can jump, you can play an instrument, whatever it is you want to do. Like, this is not going to prevent you from doing it. It's just, we need to make sure, and you need to make sure that, we just go that extra mile to make sure that you're safe while doing those things. And fortunately, for him and my other boy, the friends that we have made and from the parents, and then of course, the friends that they have made, they've all been really good, to us and to him. Like, no one's made fun of him or my other son, for, having this condition. And that's not to say that maybe sometime down the road that won't happen. But so far, we've been pretty lucky. I did send, I don't know, Aaron, if you read that article that
I did. I want to talk about it.
Okay. So I'll wait for you to bring that up.
Well, I mean, I think it's kind of part of what Eddie was just asking, along the lines of you're communicating this with your kid, but then the life experience of it around others in certain environments takes on a whole new, adds layers to the experience, right? So you wrote an article about your son's inclusion or your son's introduction to public school and the public school experience while dealing with the type 1 diabetes. And this was around, I think was it around the time you guys first got the diagnosis?
Yeah. So he was diagnosed in kindergarten and for that one school year, he was in a public school, one that was not assigned to our house. We actually had a lottery into that school because we knew that that was one of the few good schools that remain within the Los Angeles Unified School District. So we felt very fortunate that, we got him into that place. And then, of course, I don't know, what was it, 2-3 weeks most into the school year, the diagnosis happened. So, and I will say the only reason that he finished his kindergarten year at that school was because of the teachers that he had that year. So the main teacher was great, and she had an assistant that really went above. Both of them really went above and beyond the call of duty for him. The problem was we had learned that had he stayed there had he continued on there for his first grade year, there was no assistant teacher. And my wife and I just said, this is going to be really difficult for him to manage this as a 6-year-old without any additional help. And I said, I can only imagine how difficult and frustrating it would be for the teacher to have to constantly have interruptions because there could be a potential blood sugar issue. Not to mention the fact.
Did you have to sit in the class, or did one of you have to sit in the class with him?
Yeah. So for like the first few months, either Amy and my wife or myself would sit there all day with him in school because there was only a nurse at that school like one day a week. And when we called the school district and said, hey, our son was just diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, like we need a nurse here daily to help him. The school district's reply to me was, well, I'm really sorry to hear about your kid, but in our mind, as far as the LAUSD is concerned, type 1 diabetes does not require that service. And I was just floored. I'm like, how can you tell me that the father of an almost 6-year-old kid and as a parent, like, this is all brand new to us. Like, you forget the jobs that we do. Like I said, like my experience with diabetes was like in, out, fix the blood sugar and go on to the next thing. But now we're talking about having to manage this 24 hours a day and all the ins and outs and the idiosyncrasies of the disease, which I didn't know nothing about until, we're living it. So I just couldn't believe that a school district would have the audacity to say that, especially with a kid so young. But so anyway, eventually they did start sending a nurse daily, albeit a different person, only for recess and lunch to basically help him check his blood sugar. And we got him on an insulin pump very, very quickly, which I'm so glad for.
What does that mean? Is that the thing that goes? There's like a tube or something?
Yeah. So basically, when you're first diagnosed, and some people choose to do this, the acronym is MDI, which stands for multiple daily injections. So some people, everybody's going to start that way, and some people choose to go that route, and that's cool. We didn't think, at least for a kid, that was, the way to go, because, that's multiple daily injections. You're getting insulin shots many, many times throughout the course of a 24-hour period.
And that's why you sat in the class. That's
why we sat in the class, because we had to do that for him. So when he got the insulin pump, so that's a machine. His is about the size of, I'd say maybe like a half an iPhone. And, kids being so technologically savvy these days, that was what was appealing to him, is that it didn't really look like a medical device. It kind of looked like an iPhone. And it's all touch
he had
screen.
status early on. That's funny.
Right. But it was very user friendly. Like, I remember when the sales person was at our house explaining to us how this thing worked. He's like, this thing's so simple, like just the basic functions. He's like, this is how you unlock the screen. And he's like, here are a couple features, like, here, just see if you can, we're going to pretend, like, here, see if we can pretend to administer insulin on this thing without any instruction from me. So, my wife and I looked at it, we pushed a couple of buttons, and we're like, oh, dude, this is like simple. Like, this is awesome. So we got him on that. And when we had him on the pump, like I said, the nurse would show up, different person for recess and lunch, help him check his blood sugar and push a couple of buttons on his pump. And I'm like, he can do that. Like,
yeah,
I don't really need you for that. I need you for the in between, the after recess, the after PE, the before, the after lunch, the after snack, because that's when, activity levels can affect your blood sugar, like maybe hours after the fact, and that's when we need somebody to be there for him.
There's so many questions I have, and I'm trying to find the best way to structure them.
Brian, you unloaded a lot of info.
Yeah, no,
it's a lot.
Well, it is, but it's also, it raises, like, everything you talk about raises other questions and raises other topics. But you did mention technology and how, and Aaron and I have talked on this podcast before about how technology, children's relationship to technology, and there's sort of the standard parent thing of not wanting too much device time, but for you, that device interaction means something wholly different. Sure. I know in the T1D world, there's things like GCM monitors, like implants, things like that, continuous glucose monitoring devices that are actually embedded. I know there's a whole other discussion you can have about, sort of like role models that your kids can look up to with T1D. I know of two, SD Hyam from the band Hyam and the professional wrestler Kyle O'Reilly, and both of them have CGMs. But your children are still growing. So is there, I know there's like some controversy with parents around getting CGMs embedded in kids. I know some doctors won't do it until they've sort of like stopped growing. Where are you on that? And how do you feel? Is it something your kids have, or is it something that's like on your roadmap?
No, it is something our kids have. We use the Dexcom CGM, which stands for continuous glucose monitor. And with the particular pump that they use the Tandem T-Slim X2. So these two things actually talk to each other. So you kind of need both of them to take full advantage of this pump. So the pump that they have is pretty much the close. There are a couple of other manufacturers, but for Tandem, this is our second go with them. We have their original pump, and now we have this updated pump, which is really just amazing. It talks to the Dexcom, so it monitors your blood sugar, and it will. So there are two types of insulin delivery that a pump will do. It'll give you what's known as basal insulin, which is basically your background insulin, which our pancreases are secreting right now for a functioning pancreas. So the pump takes over that function and is just giving like slow little drips of insulin. And then there is bolus, which will either you give to correct a high blood sugar, and or for when you eat. So like I said, carbohydrates are what we're mainly trying to cover because those turn into sugars. So with this pump, if there is a high blood sugar, the pump in communication with the Dexcom will say, "Oh, we're reading a blood sugar. I'm just making up a number, 250. Okay, we don't like that," and it'll automatically give a corrective bolus for that. In addition, which is really cool. In addition to, it's monitoring the blood sugar for changes. So if the blood sugar starts to drop, it'll actually shut itself off and cease giving the basal background insulin. And then when the blood sugar recovers, it will turn itself back on, as well as it will adjust the basal insulin for going lower, or even if it's going high, it'll give you a little bit more. So to hopefully prevent that's the concept behind it. Sometimes it works great. Other times, like I said, diabetes doesn't play nice. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it just smiles and laughs at you and says, "Keep on coming. What else you got for me?"
There's this idea of lack of control that keeps popping up into my head about this experience. And you're talking about the public school system not supplying a sense of oversight and safety that you needed for McCabe being at the age that he was in. So you pulled him out, right? You pulled him and moved him into a different school.
We did.
And then your second kid also was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes.
Yeah.
So this leads me to, one is like, oh shit. Two starts opening up conversations of, is this genetic? Is my third also going to have this? What is causing this?
Right.
But also you've gone through this with McCabe. So you kind of, I'm assuming, started having a roadmap of in your head of, okay, this is what we need to do. Correct?
Right. Yeah. So, obviously when Finn was diagnosed, that was obviously devastating as well. But because of the fact that we've, lived with it for a few years prior to Finn's diagnosis, it was still a bitter pill to swallow, but definitely in terms of managing it, we're like, okay, so now we just have to do everything just times two.
And you both work full time and your firefighter schedule is insane. So, I remember when you originally posted about this and told me about this experience, I feel like I'm barely able to manage with one kid. You and Eddie both have two boys and a girl each, and being a full-time, working full-time and also being there for your kids is already overly a full-time job. But then having this pile onto it, not only are you being faced with how the public school system will be there to support this, and then the ideas of those in possibly less fortunate communities not receiving the support and not having other opportunities to get that support. There's the idea of, okay, what happens in the middle of the night?
Yeah.
What happens when you're asleep?
Yeah. I will say that we, as terrible as it was to, be given this diagnosis, not once, but now twice, fortunately, we do live in a nice area and we do have resources available to us. And thankfully, what I have learned about diabetes from a financial standpoint is, if I did not have the insurance policy that I have, we'd be homeless. It is not a cheap disease. And then now do it twice. So thankfully, my job has afforded me amazing healthcare, for my whole family, regardless of medical conditions. So, we still do pay for the insulin, but not nearly as much as we would had we've been like basically fully 100% out of pocket. Like, it is astronomically expensive. And what I will say about the public schools, I was obviously writing that from our perspective and our experience. I know other people that have diabetic children in the public schools may have had great experiences, and I hope for most people that is the case. We did not, and we felt that we needed to correct a problem in its infancy before it became a really big issue. So they're all in private school right now, and the support that we have there from full-time nurse, the same nurse, and she has an assistant, so it's always the same people, to the text threads with the teachers. It's just night and day difference. And the school that all of my kids are at is the elementary school I went to as a kid, so I already had ties to that school. I told my wife, I said, with or without diabetes, I said, if I had my choice, that's where I would want them to go. But now I felt like we had no other choice but to do that. So that's where they are. And it's been a much better experience. Now, my oldest is going to be in 7th grade next year, and he will be moving from the lower campus to the upper campus. So there is no nurse there, because hopefully by then he will be able to quote unquote self-manage with help from mom and dad through text message or phone call. So there are still some things that he needs to learn how to do on his own. And we will teach him that. But, at some point, the person living with diabetes is going to have to take over the reins and manage this on his or her own.
Right.
So especially when they're away from mom and dad. So.
Yeah. I want you to talk to me about Jelly Bean, because I remember Jelly Bean's a dog.
Jelly Bean is a dog.
The dog that we've been hearing. You got Jelly Bean specifically for support, correct?
So Jelly Bean is a full public access service dog, and his job, he's known as it's funny.
Is he a Wheaton Terrier?
He is a golden doodle.
Golden doodle.
He's been mistaken for a Wheaton Terrier. So he is known as which stands for Diabetic Alert Dog. So I've said I'm his father, but Jelly Bean's his dad. So basically we found an organization in Las Vegas, Nevada called Diabetic Alert Dogs of America, and they train dogs to become service dogs and their job is to alert to high and low blood sugars. And we got him because at the time McKay did not know when he was low, what that felt like, or really when he was high. But in both types of blood sugars are bad. Prolonged high blood sugars over the course of years and years and years can lead to a whole bevy of complications, but a severe low blood sugar is immediately life-threatening. So to us, obviously that was scary when he had no idea. So that was known as a hypoglycemic unaware. He had no idea. And so I knew that we had to do something to try to figure this out and try to help him out. And like most people, I didn't even know a service dog for that even existed. I was like most, a service dog is for people who cannot see, a guide dog for the blind. So I've come to learn that there are service dogs for a lot of medical issues. And when I found out about this, I knew that I needed to get him one. So I started doing my research. talked to a few different organizations. And then, when I found Diabetic Alert Dogs of America in my conversation with them, I felt really good about them. They hid nothing from me. They gave me former clients to talk to as references. And either way, it was really just going on blind faith, because at some point I was going to have to trust somebody. It's like, I don't know, but like I said, I just got a good vibe from them, and you fill out an application, like, why do you think you need this dog, and what type of dog do you want? What's your lifestyle? We told them, because this animal would be going into a school setting, I didn't want to have to deal with the allergy issue. Oh, my kid's allergic to dogs. And then, and not that would have mattered, because as a service dog, he has the right to go to any public location. But we also wanted to be mindful and respectful of other people as well, and not think that, our kid was any more important than anyone else's kid. So we said we wanted either a golden doodle or a labradoodle. And, so they found Jelly Bean, who's a golden doodle, and they trained him. They encouraged us to come meet him at some point during his training, which we did. And, we kind of got to see like how they operate, what they've done with him up to that point of meeting him for the first time. They always posted videos and pictures on their website. And he really has been just an amazing help.
How does he help? That's what I'm that's what I'm wondering. In what ways does he help communicate issues to you guys? And I guess I don't even know if you can answer this question, but how do you train a dog to do that?
Okay. So yeah, that's what I was wondering. Like we all know that a dog's sense of smell is just amazing, like well beyond the capabilities of a human. So basically what they do is when they're ready to start scent training the dog, they send us a collection kit, which we collected samples, I'd say over the course of maybe a month or so. And they had like little screw off top mason jars, and there was a blood sugar range on each one. So the dog is trained.
Wait, stop. Samples of what?
No, sorry. So basically, we would collect. So whenever McKay was within certain ranges of blood sugar that they wanted, we would put multiple cotton balls in his mouth, and he would get them wet with saliva, and then we put them in those jars and then freeze them. And then we'd send it. Then when we had all the samples that they wanted, we overnighted them back to Nevada, and that's what they would use to start training Jelly Bean on for those blood sugars. Because since he wasn't there, that's the best they can use to start training on those scents. And it really is truly remarkable. So when there is a blood sugar that Jelly Bean's not happy with, he comes up to you and he paws at you. And the organization did say, the work they do is amazing. They really, beyond the service work, just to see the relationship between a human and a dog, especially on such a more connected level than just a pet, is truly just really amazing. And they did say the one bad thing about these dogs is there's really no off button. It's like they will alert at you until the blood sugar is corrected, or if you ignore them enough, because they want a treat. Like that's their payment. When they do a good job, you give them a little dog treat, and they handpick these dogs. They really want to see which ones are food motivated, because they want to know which ones are going to be motivated to work, because if they don't work, then what's the point? And they have had dogs. I asked them, I said, have you ever had a dog that has failed? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. They said, unfortunately, a lot of dogs end up failing because not every dog is meant to do this type of work. Actually, one of our other dogs that we had was in training to be somebody's dad, and he failed. And they gave him to us, so we have him as a pet. He's a wonderful dog. He's trained. He just wasn't meant to do that. He wasn't happy doing that. But he loves being a pet dog for us and a member of the family, and he gets along great with Jelly Bean. But yeah, so the response to him, really the response to him was great, especially the kids. I think the younger kids, when McKay first showed up to school with this gorgeous dog, it was really neat to see how the kids reacted and were really respectful of a service dog. Now, obviously, we had to explain to them why he was there, what his purpose is, and that even though he's cute and fluffy and cuddly, that he's not a pet. He has a job, and you need to not distract him from that, because if you do, he could miss a very important alert. And the kids they took to it right away. And I remember in the early days of having Jelly Bean, we'd be out in public, in a shopping mall, obviously well pre-COVID, when shopping malls were frequented. Adults would just see him and be like, "Oh my God, how cute!" I would just come up and pet him, and it's like, dude, there's a vest on this animal that says "Don't touch me," like I'm working, and they don't care. But the kids, I've seen some kids scold adults. They're like, "You can't touch him. He's working." So it's great. Really cool. It's really cool that the kids were like all about it, and the adults, you kind of really had to train them, because it's hard. I get it. Like, he's a cute dog, and who can resist a cute dog?
Does the dog still come with them to school?
He does. McKay actually just started going back on campus just a few weeks ago. So he's chosen to leave him home, for these first few weeks. And I get it. Like, he's getting older, and, now that he's more aware of his body and what it feels like to be low or high, I honestly don't know if how often he's going to take him. So, we still have Finn can certainly take him to school. He's there have been days where McKay is like, "Oh, Finn, you can take him." And he works for both of them. And, which is fine. I've been saving the money for service dog number 2, if that's needed. As of right now, I don't know if we're going to do another one, but I want to have the money ready to go in the event of if McKay or Finn thinks that they need it. But either way, I don't regret the decision. I think at the time, now that I'm a few years removed from it, it was definitely an emotional decision to move so fast on it, because it was scary.
Of course. But you say emotional decision. You're hit with this. You want to tackle it head on sooner than later, because if you don't, there's the possibility that shit can get worse and out of control. Like that, I don't fault you for that.
No, I don't fault myself. I'm just saying now that now that I can reflect on it, I don't know if it would have hurt us to wait a couple of years into diagnosis. But like I said, I don't regret it. He's been amazing. He's certainly helped both of our boys, with trying to keep their blood sugar as in control, the best type of control we can possibly have for 2 growing boys. I would imagine when they're done growing that it'll be a much easier situation. And then of course by then they should be, 100%, in charge of their diabetes destiny, so to speak.
Right.
But it is really, just to talk about the dog again, we actually had a friend over yesterday who, incidentally enough, is also type 1 diabetic. She's older. She's like in her 40s. And she ended up getting a dog from the same organization we did because of Jelly Bean. Like we told her about him, and a few years ago she came over to meet him, and she saw like he was alerting on her like right away, and she's like, "I'm sold, done. Like, where do I sign up?" So she now has a dog, and it's been a great experience for her too. So, what else do you want to know?
Oh no, I wanted to let you finish that thought. That we're going to be coming up on the end of the show soon, but I guess my final question to you is, how are you guys doing? Like, I already view you as one of my busiest friends, and you have taken on a job of public service where you've dealt with forest fires and you've dealt with life-threatening situations on a radius of issues dealing with other people, and that in and of itself, I'm assuming you need to decompress when you get home to remove yourself from the possible horrors that you see at work. But coming home to a situation like this, to me, feels like it adds all other sorts of precarious layers that you have a semblance of control over, but still causes concern and worry. So how are you guys doing?
There's always going to be the concern that, what if we miss an alarm, what if this thing, to the end of the alphabet. But, really, I'd say that, Amy, my wife has been really, the, one at the head of all of this. We both obviously did our due diligence and trying to learn about this disease and how to manage it. But, because I work a lot, she's often home with the kids alone. And, she finds herself more often than I do, changing the insulin pumps, replacing the CGMs and, counting the carbs and, all that. So I know how to do all that stuff, of course. But like I said, because, I'm at work a lot, a lot of the burden falls on her. So, and of course she's done, an amazing job, handling this with everything else she has going on. And it's difficult because there are, mainly her, a lot of nights where you're not getting a full night's sleep, and tired, and you just need that break, and sometimes you don't get it because diabetes does not take a break. It's a 24-hour day disease, and that's really the unfortunate thing about it. Is it would be nice if it was like, hey, just take your insulin, bolus appropriately and everything will be fine. But unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way, and that's really what's sad about it is, like I said, you can do everything right and you still feel like you're doing things wrong.
Right. Well, I feel like that could just go hand in hand with just being a parent.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's certainly no manual to that. And, the diabetes manual, if there really is one, is just, is so overwhelming. I mean, it was just like I said, when the diabetes educator was there giving us all these math equations, and I suck at math. I was like, I'm never going to figure this out. I'm like, I'm going to kill my kid. I'm going to give him too much insulin or not enough because I'm scared I did the calculations wrong. And, I think when you finally get over that stress and you just relax a little bit and kind of just make what's what, then you realize it's still hard, but it's not as hard. Like I was making it harder than it needed to be. And then, like I said earlier, once you've been living with it we're living with it in terms of we're caring for someone with it. We don't live with the disease ourselves, but you start to see how that particular child, how their body basically responds to activity, to certain types of foods. Like we learned that pizza, pasta, and I'm going to get Jewish on you for a second, matzah are like just blood sugar destroyers. Just
matzah, really? Wow.
Matzah, really just horrendous things to eat. At least from our perspective. Maybe someone else, it's not that big of a deal, but that stuff sticks with you for a while. So now we can combat that, but it's still, we've learned that those are like the big bugaboos with our kids' blood sugars anyway. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Eddie, do you have a question?
I do. Yeah. We've looked at this a lot from sort of the parents' point of view, as we should. I guess my question would be, every kid has bad days, and every kid has days just about where they're tired of fat. For your boys who have this, what is a bad day of them sort of grappling with their condition or their illness look like? And as a parent, what do you and your wife do? What do you say? How do you, what do you say to encourage them or to pick them back up? Or, what combination of sort of like warm love and tough love, and like how does that work?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's really a question that I really wish doesn't even have to be asked, because there right. certainly are those days. And I think, now that they're both a little bit older, I think the acceptance is more there with them. I think before sometimes it was just hard for both of them to accept the fact that they have type 1 diabetes. And I know that, they don't want this thing to define who they are. And we've told them, they're like, this does not define you. It's just unfortunately something you have. But yeah, I mean, a bad day would just look like two very emotional, upset kids who basically, part of my language, just have a case of the fuck it's, and, just don't want to deal. And, it's hard from my perspective because, I've seen people with who are quote unquote, the bad diabetics, who either, and of course, that term bad diabetic is really just an assumption, because you see people, with below knee amputations and, who are on kidney dialysis and have high blood pressure and other.
That was my dad. Yeah.
Medical conditions. I mean, sometimes, yes. Is that possible? Absolutely. There are those people who just didn't care, never took care of themselves, and there you find them. And then there are others that try to do everything they could do, and it just still, diabetes got the best of them. But so for my end, having responded to those patients, it's hard for me to see my kids get in that mood, because I don't want them to end up like that, because that's got to be even more devastating. Now when you're, relegated to a wheelchair, or you're in a dialysis chair, 3 days a week, 5 hours a day. I mean, that's not a life, man. That's terrible. And So I tell them, sometimes I would say between Amy and myself, more often than not the tough love guy. Sometimes I just tell them, hey man, you know what? Like, this sucks. I get it, but too bad. Like, you've got to deal with it, and we've got to make sure that you're taken care of. And and other times we're just, and Amy has to remind me of that fact. She'll be like, hey, let them have their emotions. Like, this sucks. And I'm like, yeah, it sucks. And it sucks for me to see them that upset. And I know it sucks for Amy to see them that upset. And then, of course, we always wonder, like, are we going to have to do this 3 times? Like, is our daughter going to eventually be diagnosed with this? So far, she hasn't. But Amy does find her. She is 8. Amy does find herself checking her blood sugar in the middle of the night. Mm-hmm. And, she thinks she's crazy. And I'm like, you're not crazy. I mean, we've been hit with this twice. So, I mean, it wouldn't be so far-fetched. If that's in our future. I mean, God, I hope not. But,
right.
One
final thing I wanted to talk about, or just to ask you from your perspective, if you met someone who was in a similar position you were in 6, 7 years ago, that is flailing and trying to find some ground beneath them to figure out the way forward if they have a kid dealing with type 1 diabetes, is there a piece of advice you would give them?
I would say that you need to find a support group, and there are those on Facebook, and or try to meet. It's kind of like that game. What is it, like 6 Degrees to Kevin Bacon? Like, somebody knows somebody that has a child with diabetes. So if random person over here goes to their friend, oh my God, my kid was diagnosed with diabetes, I don't know what to do, I'm overwhelmed. Chances are they're going to know somebody or have a friend of a friend that, is either, caring for someone with or knows somebody, and they can put them in contact with somebody. Just, even if it's just to have a bitch and moan session.
Yeah.
Just to know that, you're not the only mother or father out there that's facing this and has to care for a child with diabetes. And, it's funny because I feel like ever since our kids were diagnosed, now I feel like I'm hearing about more and more kids being diagnosed with this. And it's just weird. I'm like, is this like a trend now, or like, is this the
it might be one of those things where I didn't, back 10 years ago when I got my Prius, I didn't notice other Priuses on the street until I got my own. I feel like your eyes open to a certain experience, and then suddenly your radar picks, your radar's picking it up more.
You're definitely more hyper aware. And I mean, and when Amy and I are out,
sorry, I didn't mean to compare your experience to me buying a Prius. That was so fucking stupid of me.
No, but it's true though. You become
you're like, oh, you're administering insulin to your kid. Well, I bought a fuel efficient car, and now I see them everywhere.
That's right.
I know exactly what that's like.
Yeah. Well, I have a fuel efficient car too, so. But no, you do become more hyper aware, and, like standing in line at the grocery store or wherever, like, oh, that person has diabetes. I see them checking their Dexcom. You're like, I know exactly what that device is. Yeah. Or I see them giving themselves insulin. You're like, okay. So again, my kids are definitely not the only two that have this condition. There are other people out there that live it every day and live very normal lives. And I'm sure that, back when, however long ago that they were diagnosed, I'm sure they had their moments of high emotions, and they're just like, I'm over it. I'm done. I don't care. I don't want to deal with it. And then, they realize that as long as they know that they can manage this and that they've got this, that they're going to be fine. And
Right.
I think that's really the big takeaway, is that anybody that's going to listen to this show that has a kid that's had diabetes for years or just got diagnosed yesterday, they're going to be fine, because you, as their whether you're a single father, single mother, or married, that you guys are going to step up to the plate, and you're going to learn the ins and outs of how to manage this disease. One, well, you don't have a choice. I mean, that's fact. Two, because you want your kid to have a normal life. And three, because, you don't want your kid to face any sort of discrimination or just feel like they're the odd one out because of this condition.
Right. Well, thank you for answering that question. So this has been a heavy episode, but it's also been very informative and educational.
Yeah.
Eddie and I have been doing a new thing recently where we talk about a piece of entertainment we might have been watching or into or reading or listening to this past week. And last week, Eddie, you were not on the show, but Drew Daywalt talked about the Groucho Marx biography that he read that really made me want to read it. So I don't know. Do you have anything this week?
Anything this week? Trying to think about something. I've been so head down in work that I have not experienced anything culturally. Oh no, Shadow and Bone. Great little show, Shadow and Bone. I've been enjoying it. I started watching on Netflix. I'm not done with it yet. No spoilers, please. But Shadow and Bone on Netflix. Great adaptation of the books. I think it improves upon the books in a couple instances.
You've read the books?
I read the first one. Yeah. So but yeah, I enjoyed it. So
yeah, that show does not look like anything I'd want to watch at all. But but I'm not a big young adult
it doesn't come across guy. It's more along lines with like The Witcher than like a lot of YA stuff. So if you like The Witcher, it's kind of the same. All right, that's fine.
No, but I'm not knocking your. I read about what it was about. Sounds interesting. I think my wife read the books.
Executed well. So
I've been doing this weird escapist thing where every Thursday night I watch Law and Order: Organized Crime. And it's the new spin-off series where Chris Maloney is back as Elliot Stabler, but it's not like the previous Law and Order shows. This is one through line story that continues in each episode instead of doing like a procedural case of the week thing. And I got to tell you, vengeful Elliot Stabler out to kick some ass and kill people is my kink. I wasn't expecting to find it so enticing to watch Chris Maloney just go full on nuts on people while also dealing with his own PTSD and grief due to the loss of his wife. But man, it's like so dark. It's so bleak, but also I look forward to it every week. It's bizarre. I don't watch Law and Order, but I'm super into this show. Brian, I know I'm just like taking you by surprise here, but if there's anything you've watched, listened to, or read this week, I would love to hear about it. Or just recently.
Yeah, I'm not much of a reader. I'm not
I
really
know.
Sure I'm not really sure I know how to read. I don't think
the LA Fire Department does not require you to be a literate person. I get it.
True, but no, that's not true. No, I actually before we started our this meeting here, I put on a movie called The Lie, which is on Amazon Prime. I think I got about maybe 20 minutes into it, so I can't tell you really. It's so far I'm enjoying it, but I did read the reviews. It got like I think 43% on Rotten Tomatoes, so I'm not really a good movie
stuff.
critic. Yeah,
sure.
So
I did also start a documentary before we came on today called White Boy, about White Boy Rick.
Yeah, my wife was watching that
on Netflix. I kind of knew the story, and there was a movie that was made about him a few years ago, but dear Lord, I'm actually probably going to finish it once we stop recording here. But this is our attempt, Brian, to lighten up the mood before we end things. And Eddie and I work in media, so we tend to.
Right.
Suddenly, the video is super close to your face. Hi, Brian.
Oh,
So thanks again, man, for taking the time to come on the show. One final thing is before we go, I've been asking our guests recently if there's any final words of wisdom you want to impart on our listeners before we end things. I think you've already imparted those words of wisdom, but I'm giving you one final attempt, one final offer to step onto your soapbox and say something.
Words of wisdom. No, really just, like I said, I think once you get over the initial shock, I mean, I remember, being in the hospital, like crying when McKay was diagnosed, because it was just like, I had no idea what to do. And of course, seeing a little kid, be diagnosed with a lifelong disease, it's heartbreaking. And I guess just what I said earlier, just once you get over that initial shock and all the emotions of, overcome you, and you've been able to kind of sort all those out, just know that you can do it. You can do it. You can manage one child, 2 children, 3 children, whatever it is. And maybe even if you yourself have diabetes, it's very possible. Lots of people do it. My wife and I are doing it. I'm going to say we've been successful because our kids are, of course, still with us and healthy, in school. I mean, that's not to say we haven't had some bumps in the road, because I would be flat out lying. But we're able to do those things, and still have them involved in other things. It's not diabetes 20. It is diabetes 24 hours a day, but it's not diabetes 24 hours a day, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. Well, Brian, I feel like we have wrung you dry. Thank you so much for coming on.
Seriously, thank you.
You're an old friend of mine, and I didn't even know most of the stuff you discussed with me just now. So thank you for elaborating and digging into your experience, because I feel yes.
No, I was going to say this was fun. I'm glad you dedicated an episode to this subject, because I think there I know of a kid, I'm not going to say this kid's name, that basically has not told anybody, including coaches, that he's a diabetic. And I'm just like, in my opinion, that's not smart. But
no, but I mean, I can only imagine there's an element of shame there if you don't want to be othered or looked at as different or treated differently. That I do understand, but from the other side of it, like if there was an emergency, like and your teachers or coaches or whoever you're with don't know, how can they help you? Right, exactly. As I was going to say before you interrupted with that story, but I thank you for interrupting with that story, Brian. This, I feel like, is I think this is a situation where a lot of people find themselves in and don't know the right first step. So getting your insight has been extremely eye-opening and helpful. And I thank you for taking the time to make yourself a little vulnerable and tell me about it. And also thanks for being a paramedic and like saving lives and shit, doing something that I'm not brave enough or capable enough to do myself.
I don't think that's true. I think you're both of those things. But
okay,
if you do want to have a show,
I remember you doing headstands and throwing kettlebells like Eddie does. It's a life. It's a road I don't walk.
Okay. Well, if you do want to have an episode dedicated to that, I'd be happy to come back. And
we're gonna have a fitness convo one of these days.
Well, yeah,
because Aaron's been in good shape too. Aaron's not a stranger to working out by any stretch of the imagination.
I'm not.
No, Aaron's very svelte. He just won't admit it.
Yeah. Welcome to the portion of the episode where I take all the accolades from my fellow man.
Accept compliments. We need men to accept compliments without being fucking weird about it.
I'm fucking weird about everything, though, Eddie.
I know, but let's just chip away at that one little weird piece at a time.
You're right. Brian, Aaron, thanks for coming on the... Jesus Christ, let me thank you.
Sorry.
Brian, thank you for coming on the show. Were you going to say something?
I was going to say, Aaron, I think the reason that we became friends is that we're both kind of weird in our own unique, respective ways, and it just worked.
No, I just wanted your beard.
Oh, well, you've got it. You're allowed to have one, and my job
you can definitely come on the show, because there's other stuff I wanted to talk to you about. Brian is currently helping take care of our old English teacher, who was kind of a father figure to me, who has Parkinson's. Brian was a firefighter, is now firefighter paramedic. I'm sure there's elements of that, especially during COVID, that could bring up all sorts of things to talk about. But we are out of time. Folks. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into episode number 15 of the Dadward Spiral. I'm sure Eddie is also thankful for all of you.
No, yes, of course I am.
I don't want to speak for you, but I'm just going to make the assumption.
We are always thankful for you here. You feel free to make that assumption any day of the week.
Here in the Dadward bunker. No, really, I'm just in bed. I'm in bed. Shout out to Dragon Wagon Radio for continuing to give us a place where our show exists. And I say this every week. If you want merch, if you want merchandise, if you want a coffee mug, Brian, I know you're really into your coffee. You could go to dragonwagonradio.com/dadward-spiral. We have a store. You, sir, could get a coffee mug that has the logo of the show featuring an animated me falling precariously in the shadow of my daughter. I know you want it. I know you want it. Next time I come over and you serve me some of your artisanal coffee, I would love to see that on your coffee bar.
Okay. Well, maybe I guess challenge accepted.
You remember my best friend, Calvin. He's the one who created the logo. You would be giving back, Brian.
Well, your best friend Calvin's a brilliant artist, and
he hasn't listened to a single episode of this show, but thank you.
well, okay. Then you need to thank Eddie. Make him do that.
I want to thank Eddie for continuing to go on this journey with me and provide the gravitas and the sort of grounded practicality that I miss in my day-to-day life.
I think the word you're looking for is haggardness. Haggardness.
Sure, there's that too.
I am haggard. I have 3 kids.
Look,
I'm haggard.
I've been using eye cream recently, so I don't look haggard.
I need to do that because I got some bags, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we could start talking about that and never end the show, but I'm going to do it. I'm ending the show. If you like what you heard, especially me talking about using eye cream because I need it, please go to iTunes and give us a review, a rating, a like. Please, a like us. I need more coffee, apparently, Brian. Thanks everyone for listening. We will hope. I'm not going to tell you who we have on next week because I haven't finalized the schedule, but hopefully this person will be with us and it'll be an amazing episode. And if it's not, it will still be an amazing episode because this journey has been great for me so far. And I hope you all have enjoyed the show. We like to end this by quoting the late Michelle McNamara, Patton Oswalt's late wife. It's chaos. Be kind, people. And until next we meet, be excellent to each other.
Internet! I'm Coy Jandro, a Bostonian who loves pop culture, comic books, and people. And I host Coycast. It's a podcast about all those things. If it fits in on a con floor, we talk about it on Coycast. Myself and producer Jake do previews, reviews, deep dives, and tinfoil hat theories about everything from movies, TV, and the comic books themselves. I also like to dish out comic recommendations from my 100+ pull list a week so you know what's best to buy. So join us, True Believer, on koicast.com or wherever you're listening to this podcast right now.
Dragon Wagon.